process, because during the first national lockdown you couldn't get anywhere near a garden centre or a DIY store, and that was problematic for some people who were mid-build. I mean, garden centres perhaps less so, but if you needed something genuinely from a DIY store at that point, you couldn't get it for love nor money.
But it's really strange, because the original lockdown, after it was lifted, when I went to the hairdresser, it was the only place that they ever took my temperature.
Right. Yeah.
And they're now locked down again.
Yeah, they are. It's the close contact environment, though, in a hairdresser's that is arguably more risky than walking around the aisles of B&Q. So I can understand why one is open and one is not in terms of the nature of how COVID secured.
Some of the shops were really good. You were like one of the pet shops. If you were allowed to go in and buy the dog's food.
Yeah.
But if it was for the vet or the groomer, you had to wait outside till the previous customer came out.
Right.
So they kept that under control.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't believe it. They're having quite a discussion on Facebook about this additional hours. And I mean, it's an hour Monday to Friday and 2 hours Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah. Well,
So it's quite a considerable time. I don't know if you recall, I told you the story about the protection dog for the footballer.
Remind me. It's just slipped my mind now.
Yeah. It actually, he had it about a fortnight and it ran away.
Oh, yes. What's the latest?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's sort of gone quiet. There's actually another one from another club has had problems with a fire with his cars. So we don't know whether he's going to get one as well.
Okay. All right, well, make sure you update me when you know more. Thank you, Mary. Jane, morning to you on Twitter. When I went to Pompeii a couple of years ago, I had to say I found it so very fascinating, but so totally sad. And I climbed Mount Vesuvius. Thank you for the photograph. That's astonishing, that picture you sent there, which is an image of somebody frozen by the ash cloud, sitting in fear by the look of it, Jane. Really powerful. Thank you for that tweet this morning. On the text line today, Donna in Rotherham says, I agree totally with your caller Johnny from Belfast. I've never been rich. Neither were my mum and dad, but we always had love and comfort. Food on the table and manners. Manners above all. Manners and love are free. Please remember that, everyone, says Donna. And Steve in Devon says, Jim, I've been fortunate enough to visit Pompeii while my ship was berthed in Naples. The details of how the population were overcome are laid bare. Food plates on the tables, etc. One thing that made me chuckle, though, was the sign on the wall pointing towards a brothel. The shape of the sign was not a finger. Red lights had not yet been invented, I guess. Steve, thank you for that. Great stuff. Right, 81333, start your text with the letters UK. Right, to James next in D-side. How are you, James? Good morning.
Good morning. You all right, Jim?
Very well, thanks. Very, very well. What's on your mind, James?
Not too. Could I just ask a quick question for the listeners as well? The first I listen. I'm an industrial cleaner. I listen to your show every evening. I'm not being funny, but you do a cracking job. But just putting a face to a picture. Yeah. Can you just tell me how old you are? You mind your kids, or you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind at all. I'm 48. I've been with my partner who's, oh gosh, no, he's going to kill me. I can't remember. He's just turned 40. And we've been together for 11 years now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But we're not married yet, and that's something that he is rather aggrieved about. But we'll get there one day.
Yeah, you'll get there one day, mate. I mean, the wait for all this to blow over, to be honest with you. But no, you do an absolutely cracking show. I just thought I'd ask the question so people put it in their head. But what sort of person you are, what sort of age you are. And obviously, basically, you know what you're talking about. And obviously, you do because you're pretty educated. The reason I was phoning up, to be honest with you, Chip. Basically, what it is you said you went to university and obviously you pinch off things to pay for one thing and let you live one thing another. The only reason I'm phoning is, I mean, and this goes out to parents, whoever listen out there, and students, to be honest with you. At the moment, I mean, my lad, he's my eldest one, he's done university, and the other one's just, well, he's in his last year as such. And like normally, you know as well as what I do, you have to get a part-time job and one thing or another to pay the bills and all the rest of it. I mean, obviously, me and my wife works on the front line in a hospital, and we send up every week what we can as such. But my issue is really just out to students and parents, really, and this is really important. I know people are going on COVID and one thing or another, right? And I find it sometimes really petty. Like I always said to my son, I said, if you ever got a problem, mate, I said, just pick up the phone and give me a buzz, do you know what I mean? And he phoned me up the other night, he said, Dad, he said, we're in lockdown. He said, a lot of the kids up here, which are in the first year, you don't know what I mean by that, don't you? So they're new. Yeah. He said there's so many fatalities, and I'm not being negative. I don't mean to be negative. Do you know what I mean? This is going out to students and parents that they're struggling, and they don't want to phone the parents up and explain, say to them because they flee the nest. Well, this is happening, that's happening, blah 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 blah, and all that lot. Yeah. Well, I just say to parents and students, no matter how big the problem is, nothing is worth taking your own life. You with me? Now, this hasn't probably been brought up, but it's, like I say, my lad, I'm not going to say where he is, but he just says that there's been a few major, incidents in the uni where he is. He said, and Dad, he said, I just can't get my head around it, do you know what I mean? I said, mate, you haven't got a problem. Pick up the phone, I'll come and get you, or come home, do you know what I mean? Either I've and people are going about COVID and this, that, and the other. They can't do shopping, this is shut, that shop. But if you brought a kid up for a nipper, do you know what I mean? And then they flee the nest, and you know all that lot, and you think you'll check on them, they're all right. They're always going to say, yeah, I'm all right, Dad, all right, Mum, I'm all right, Mum, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's still kids, don't we, Jim? You with me? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course I do, and I've been listening carefully to what you're saying there, James. I relate to an awful lot of it, actually, because it's about love at the end of the day, isn't it? And it's about...
It's just about love. I just hope, as you know and I know, students will be listening to your programme tonight. And so the students out there, and if there's any parents awake, it's a phone call doesn't cost nothing, does it? Do you know what I mean? If you need help, make a phone call. And just say, look, I'm struggling, or because 9 times out of 10 they won't admit it, or they're too embarrassed, or it's the first year and they said, oh, I'll be all right, and all this, that, and the other. Well, but like I say, it just hurt me, but when my lad told me he was on Saturday night, he was. I mean, I work nights, listen to your show every night, and I think you do a cracking job, do you know what I mean?
It's so sad to witness that, and at your son's age, to try and quantify somebody being so totally and utterly bereft of that kind of love and support that they feel their only option is to take their own life is incredibly difficult, even for us as, who are a bit longer in the tooth, James, to understand is really difficult.
I'm 52, to be honest with you, and my age did as well. And like I said, I'm 52, so I've got 3 kids, do you know what I mean?
Well, hopefully, if there's one thing that comes out of this pandemic, it's that our awareness of other people's status and of mental health, of well-being, is perhaps something that we're all a bit more conscious of. Because if you think back to a year ago and how relentless life felt, this time last year we would have been careering towards not just Christmas but another general election, and all that we were talking about was Brexit and everything else going on at this time 12 months ago. We weren't really paying attention to how each other were feeling.
I know, you just don't think, do you? You just don't think, and before you know it, you know what I mean?
But maybe we should.
Well, that's why I thought, like I said, I didn't want to waste your time enough, but I really do, from me heart and heart, honest to God, I mean, I wasn't brought up, I was dragged up, but apart from that, I had a good upbringing, but it's just like, people are whining about COVID and the government and this, that, and the other, and there's kids, you know what I mean, that are in uni, and they can't get part-time jobs, and they're struggling to eat, and blah, blah, blah. Maybe the mum and dad's been laid off, and all the rest of it. And it's just phone up your son, or even if the students are listening, phone up your mum and say, look, I'm struggling, it's no major issue. You're not going to cut your head off, are
Because
you?
then
You know what I mean?
what that does is give you perspective, and that sort of folds in the other topic we were talking about taking time out. If you get perspective on things, you understand it more broadly. You see the bigger picture, don't you? And when you can't see the wood for the trees, when you're stuck in a moment and you can't look around you because it's all getting a bit overwhelming, you do need to take a step out, and that might be a phone call.
It's always the things you don't expect, isn't it? You never expect it.
It could be a good book or something. You know, it could be. I remember reading a book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom, and that was also life-changing. It's not a big book. You could read it in a day. But it just gives you perspective on the impact that you have on those around you and on life in general, and
just
how that...
simple things, isn't it? You know what I mean? The ones that are close to you.
Great stuff.
We both of us, obviously, like I say, Mike's on the front line. Do you know what I mean? We've both had COVID, so it's over and done with. But I said to my wife, I need my son. I phone him every day. I said, mate, I love you.
Oh, wow.
If you got a problem, ring me back. No, I'm not I'm not giving you saying I'm an angel. I'm no angel. Just say, I love you. Yeah. Any problems, give me a buzz. Do you know what I mean? Like, you phoned me up the other day, said, oh, Dad, I'm struggling a bit, blah, blah, blah. But he can talk to me, do you know what I mean? It's just communication.
I love it. James, great stuff. Brilliant call. Very valuable. Thank you. I wish you well. 116123 is the phone number for the Samaritans. If you have, or you feel like you have nobody to reach out to, you do. They're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And it's an astonishing service. If you've never used the Samaritans and think it is purely the preserve of those people who are feeling suicidal, no, they're there to talk. And if you want to call but you don't want to ring a radio station and talk to me live on the air, that's completely understandable. But the Samaritans do astonishing work, and their phone number is 116123. Jacqueline's in Birmingham next. Hello, Jacqueline. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Jim. Thanks so much for taking my call.
Thanks for holding on there for me. It's lovely.
Well, I just adore your show, and you just have this amazing way of communicating, and I think I've never phoned up a radio station before, so this is down to you, really. And
welcome. Thank you for calling.
You're such humanity.
Well, what's on your mind? Thank you for that. That's very kind of you. But what's on your mind? What made you call tonight?
Well, I'm calling about this sabbatical.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm not in holy orders or anything like that, but I was just wondering whether my situation would be considered a sabbatical, because in the 80s I always wanted to open my own salon, this Thatcher thing, to go out and do stuff for yourself, sort of thing. And I did this near the city centre and was very happy.
What sort of salon? A hair salon?
It was a hair salon.
Lovely, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and it was just, you can imagine it was all beautifully done and lovely colours, and I just loved it, and just loved treating women and giving people the chance to be in a lovely space. But a couple of years later, my son came along, and it turns out that he's autistic with severe learning difficulties.
Okay.
And so I just, without a thought, I didn't try to sell the salon, I just closed it down. Okay. And decided I'm going to bring my son round, I'm going to make him right, sort of thing. Okay. And when I had the diagnosis, that was my decision, And to cut a long story short, he's now 34 years old, and I've had several sabbaticals since then, because once I got him into special schools and did all the things that he needed, his patenting and all that stuff, I went back to college and it was did a course called New Way Access course for higher education. I did that, and it was hard work because I was still having to bring up a young man with autism who had no language, so it was very challenging, and still is, really. And I graduated and had a job, and I thought, I can pay people to help me with him now, sort of thing. And I did that for a short time, and I had to stop and start all over again, because nobody could cope with him. He was so challenging. Yeah. So in a way, I have been on sabbatical for about 34 years.
But this ties into something that James was saying, the previous caller, about the bond between parent and child, because as soon as you have that child in your life, your needs become second place, don't they? They become...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I did notice that about what he was saying about, you just doesn't think about it. You just go off and do what you know you need to do for your child. And that's what I did, and that's what I've been doing, since.
Any regrets about the choices you made over those 30 plus years?
No regrets, because I always sort of do something in the space of looking after my son. I gave him everything. In fact, I started an organisation called Be Autistic, and it was to do activities and things. The things that I thought my son needed, I went out and created the service for it.
Okay.
Because there wasn't anything available at the time. And that's how I think we should live in life, It's organic. If it needs doing, you do it. And it was a struggle, but we did that. And my life's been like that, and so I haven't regretted it, because I've done things in between, And once my son was at school, I did lots of voluntary stuff. I was governors at different schools. I just got involved and kept my head straight, really, because it was just too much to contemplate the negative aspects of all of this.
So I suppose what it comes down to is what any individual might consider valuable to their own lives in terms of their dreams, their aspirations, ambitions, what have you, and then making or placing them secondary to the needs of someone else, in this case your son.
Absolutely.
It's an incredibly altruistic act that one would hope every parent would aspire to, but of course we know that's not always true.
It's not always true, but sometimes it's also because of the challenges parents do face.
Yes.
And sometimes it's easy to sort of sometimes say, this is too much for me, I can't do it. But then you have to think, if it's too much for you, who is it okay for, to do these things? The challenges you have with a person like my son is that he doesn't have spoken language. You have to keep encouraging him all the time. Every day is a new day, and that's how I got on with my life. When I woke up the next morning, whatever happened the day before, it was like, oh, I've got a new boy today. What are we going to do today then?
Do you still have your hairdressing skills?
Well, no, not really. I just sort of let that go, really.
Yeah, fair enough.
I do a lot of stuff for myself, especially with lockdown. Yes, you have to do stuff for yourself, but no, I realize these are things that you can it's just part of your journey, and you can leave it behind. I take a different road every time something happens. Because when he was in school, for example, and I knew he was all right, I went back to college.
Yeah.
In the daytime, I had to find something to do with myself to keep myself occupied.
Of course.
Yes, but it's and then of course when I finished and had a degree and everything, and I had a job in actually the college I actually studied in. I had to give that up again. So that was the second semester.
But what's really interesting about that as well, and this triggered a memory as you started your story, was the value not just of a visit to the hairdressers for aesthetic reasons, but of course it's an opportunity to talk to someone and share something about your life with the person who's cutting your hair for you, and you leave feeling not just like you've got a lovely new haircut and refreshed and ready to face the world, but you've also managed to unload some of that, and we're missing that right now, aren't we? We're missing that as an opportunity to just share with somebody.
Yes. It was just part of the community. It was all of that, wasn't it? To get us all on our feet again, sort of thing. Yeah.
Jacqueline, thank you.
Hey. Thank you so much, Jim, for what
Pleasure.
you're doing.
Anytime. No, we'll talk again, I hope. Thank you, and I wish your son well. What a powerful story. Lovely to talk to you. The altruism of parenthood is something I've never directly experienced myself, other than from my own parents, which is just an astonishing thing that I have been blessed with through my whole life. It's not something every child has, I get, and I've never had to issue it myself, as I'm not a parent, but I'm in great admiration of those who do. Let's continue with some of your texts. Den in Wakey says, Jim, I was in a children's home in Hexham for 12 years, went to a middle school, and they thought I was an ESN child. Educationally subnormal was the term at that time. I hope that's as confined to history as Pompeii now, but then goes on to say, I was put in a special school in Newcastle. Today, I've always had a job. I was a manager for a concession shop in the duty-free departure area of Heathrow. I passed my driving test first time. I've done a lot of travelling. Been to India, Chicago, Geneva, Paris, Frankfurt as well. If those people saw me now, hey, good for you, Den. I love it. You should never allow the barriers in life to impede your determination. You clearly haven't. Hello to Aid, who's in Forest Gate, says, Jim, I was also stuck because of cladding issues. My flat is in a block under 18 metres, but with wooden cladding and walkways. No chance of being signed off with an EWS1 anytime in the near or even far future. My partner of 35 years died earlier this year. Both boys are now at university. My mother-in-law, who's 91 years old, is very close to me, but probably in her final days. I just want a valuation with a view to planning my future. But evidently I'm now sitting in a white elephant. Aid, who's in Forest Gate, thank you. I wish you well. It's so challenging. Do keep the text coming. This one from Brian says simply, Jim, rich or poor, your health is your wealth. And I think that has become more and more apparent as this year has unfolded around us, hasn't it, Brian? Lovely to hear from you. Right, we go. Do pick up the phone and call. 0800 731 2000 is the number you need.
Get your weekend sorted with Gavin and Stacey.
We're getting an Indian. What do you fancy?
Chicken boona, lamb boona, prawn boona, mushroom rice, bag of chips, keema naan and 9 poppadoms.
All episodes streaming now on BBC iPlayer.
Text 81333 and start your message with the letters UK. Text are charged at your standard message rate. See our privacy notice on the BBC website.
We're expecting some announcements from the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, in the next day or so as to the spending plan that he's about to unveil. We are aware of some of the detail of that. For example, the Chancellor is to announce an extra £3 billion of funding for the NHS. But with that comes the caveat, the warning that people will soon see an economic shock laid bare as the country deals with the fallout from the COVID pandemic. This 1 year funding will be pledged in the spending review due to be delivered on Wednesday. So we're seeing some detail of that being leaked ahead of essentially what is an interim budget announcement. And we'll get a chance, I think, probably to talk about that during the course of the week. But if you want to just put your 2 penneth worth in on that, then please feel free. Right, let's continue. 0800 731 2000. Margot is on the line next in West Sussex. Hello, Margot. Good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Well, I've started to become an insomniac. I've been listening to you for the last few weeks, so I'm brave enough to phone in tonight.
Thank you.
Well, it's 30 years ago, when I had a 3-year-old daughter, I decided I wanted to study homeopathy.
Okay.
And I had a husband who was, well, very conventional and very against me. You know, we had a child, I had to stay home with a child, and I said to him, well, I'm going to, even though I've got a child and I stay home, I'm going to work and I'm going to pay for that course and I'm going to do it. But what it meant was that he would have to look after our child one long weekend a month while I did this. And a child that's like with a mother all the time and a father that's working doesn't really interact with a father, but it was the making of both of them and the making of me.
Really? So I'm intrigued that there was ambition.
I would think all three things.
Right, okay.
He was quite a few years older than me.
Okay.
He was probably frightened that, I'm off on an adventure, and I'm, am I really going to do what I'm saying I'm going to do in terms of my study? And it was scary. Yeah. He'd also got this child that had been breastfed for a long time, was very picky about food, and was going to give him a hard time because she wanted mummy.
Okay, yeah.
But the end of my 3 years, to actually get to the end of that and to be able to, say to him, this has helped with our daughter's health. It's enhanced my life so much. It's made me stronger. And he had to, he did. He started to accept, okay, there's something in this.
It's the stepping out of your comfort zone thing we were talking about before, wasn't it? The idea that actually if you challenge yourself to do something you didn't think you could do, it might just, as you've said, Margot, be the making of you. And clearly it was, and I'm assuming their relationship as a result, father-daughter relationship, was cemented all the deeper as a result of those weekends, those long weekends together.
Well, partly what would happen would be there'd be the build-up to, it's getting near, she's going away, is she well enough, what's going to happen, what shall I do? And I just used to say to him, well, you're her father, you will have to do what I'd have to do, you'll have to sort it out. But now I'm reaping the benefit now, because my daughter, I've had other daughters as well, but this daughter, she now lives in Spain. She lives in Seville in Spain, and she has her daughter and she has a son, quite close in age. And I never pushed what, I believe in and what I did. I've let the children make their choices, they've gone through life. And when she had her daughter and as time's gone on, she's asked me, she said, what shall I do for this mum? What remedies? What shall I don't want to do the normal thing. And obviously been in Spain, and I've said to her, well, you have to do what you think is right and follow that. And go and ask those questions, translate while you're there, ask the questions and make sure you're getting what's right for your child. It doesn't have to be what I'm saying. So I just feel that has, sort of made our life, so wonderful.
And isn't it interesting that it's reflecting back now with hindsight that you can identify your decision to take that course all those years ago, your determination to do it despite obviously some resistance at the time from your husband, But the resistance also came from my family. Okay. My family was saying, he's saying, do you think? And also it meant that we lived in Nottingham, and my course took me to Birmingham and to London. Excuse me. And then I've got family in those areas, but I've also got family in Ireland, and I went across to Galway University when I was doing my course, and it meant I was able to see family, where I actually at that time, because I was further along, I was able to take Heather with me. And it just, I think for me, it just, even though my family at home were against it, what are you doing and why are you doing this? Yeah, because at the point you've got to frame it in the. I'm assuming we're talking about a period, in the 70s?
Yes.
Yeah, so at the time it was far less common for a young mother particularly to want to embark on a career of any kind, let alone an academic career, and to upset the family unit in that way for your own ambition would have felt very unusual. It's far more common now,
Wayward.
rightly so.
Wayward.
Yeah, I'm sure you were. Yes, I'm sure you were all sorts of things. But how enriching that has been, not just for you, but for all of those that were around you at the time. And to be able to reflect on that now is wonderful.
Well, it has a knock-on effect, doesn't it?
Of course it does. Everything
it
does.
makes you strong within your family, because I was able to go home, and because I had the knowledge behind me, and once I was up against all their prejudice and anger about things, about me being a selfish mother, a husband who's worked all week and expecting him to have the child from, Friday to Sunday night. How selfish was I? I just thought, and I had it from my mother, my father, my brothers and sisters. I had it from extended family, and I just thought, I'm doing it. I'm going. I'm so glad I did.
Wonderful stuff. Margot, what a brilliant story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us this morning. Stay safe and well. All the best to you. Nearly 20 to 3 on this Sunday morning, 22nd of November. Let's get straight next to Chris, who's in Ringwood. Then we're off to Leicester after that. Hello, Chris. Good morning to you.
Hello, Jim.
Nice to
speak
to you.
with you.
Well, you too, Chris. Thank you for your call this morning.
I often listen to you. Believe it or not, I'm writing I'm one of these people that keep a diary and write it late.
Oh, okay.
I listen to you. I'm a freak, really, but still, there we are.
Well, we'll start a club and we'll get some T-shirts printed, Chris.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Yeah, lovely.
But now then, I was speaking about what that teacher was saying.
Yeah, Jim earlier. Powerful call, that, wasn't it?
Yeah, quite true about teachers understanding. Of course, I'm going back a long time ago, but it does. I went on to say, your colleague may have mentioned, I finally wrote a book about my life, which I got it published this year, 70,000 words, up until 1985. And that was part of the reason for writing it. Was a teacher who I couldn't spell properly, and I just wanted to love to write. If you can't spell properly, you spend so much time looking for words that spell properly, and then you almost give up. So I overcame that by this teacher. I did get it through the Hampshire County Council teacher, and education, and she was just fine for me. She just knew exactly how to get me to pick up on and recall the words, and she wrote this empty book with all the capital letters of any word that you having difficulty to spell, write them in. And that's what I did. So whenever I was writing anything, particularly in the diary or writing, I did a lot of letter writing after that, and I was able to refer back. And eventually we do recall them in our memory and don't have to keep looking.
I think you're right. I think, personally, I believe putting pen to paper is a far more powerful way to form that neurological pathway and create the memory than typing on a keyboard, because you're really thinking about the shape of the letters and the word as a result.
Yeah, you're
much more powerful than typing.
Yes. Well, of course, we type on the computer now, and that's where I actually wrote the story out. Just handwriting, as I say, 70,000 words. How does that come about, we ask, anything happens above, But there I had something to say, and it's quite a story, and it's about a family feud, and I've called it, I wanted to farm, you see. Okay. But family business it would have been, but...
what was it like going through the process of seeking out a publisher and pitching to them and hoping that your work would be taken up? What was that process like for you?
Well, I think, Jim, I wanted to, much as anything, for my family, it's a lot of his history in things we go out and do, and work-wise, because a lot of it's disappeared, and I just wanted to record that write about the family and myself, my early beginnings and such like.
I've just heard, though, notoriously it's really difficult to even get a foot in the door at a publishing house to have your work looked at, let alone actually.
Well, I should go on to say that it went on to self-publishing, but actually it was American, believe it or not.
Okay.
Experts who got it published, and well, I've had a lot of people, local people who knew me, or know me rather, taken up, very interested in what I've written, you know. So, but as I said, my family will, or I'm sure they look back at it when I'm not about, perhaps, you know, my grandchildren. And as I say, I've had 3 wonderful children, my 2 daughters and a son. And this business I started just over 40 years ago, and I'm still running it. So I'm dead keen about landscape gardening. I just love doing it. So keeps me fit and so on.
I bet it does. I bet it does. Physical work, that, isn't it? My word, particularly at this time of year.
My age, I'm not don't believe what age you are.
Well, I'm 48, as I mentioned earlier on, but one of my favourite shows on the television is Garden Rescue, because I just find it such a lovely moment of catharsis to watch the transformation from design to creation. And I've loved Charlie Dimmock on the telly for as long as I can remember, but I think she's such an incredibly talented woman and so knowledgeable about her flora. And understands plant life so very well, and is able to transpose that into a garden design. It's such a skill.
That's my work. You know, garden. You remember Garden Force?
I do remember with Alan Tish.
I've taken a picture of my work and I've shown them about, and they said that's what you say. That's what you call Garden Force, you know, and it's quite true. If you, like we just described, if you change, it's just. You're looking at a beautiful picture of the world, you know, how it was and how it is, and it's so wonderful. That's all I can say about it. But could I just say one last thing, Jim, is I did travel. I wanted to travel, and one of the things I made sure about travelling is not to wait until you're 65.
Okay.
Lots of my customers did. And of course, one or the other didn't make it to 60 or whatever. And I thought, well, I'm not going to wait around for that then.
Get out there and do it. Lovely stuff, Chris.
And I travelled thousands of miles, literally. And I take my children and wherever I've gone, to Australia, Americas, South America, and I married a South American as well.
Did you really? Okay.
Yes. My grandmother was Spanish. It's all in this story, you know, and it's quite remarkable. I should marry a Spanish from South America. My grandmother came from Spain, so my grandfather was in Gibraltar. So I visited all these places, anything to do with the family. And one of the places, history for me is like the Vietnamese War. I thought it was so awful, and I always wanted to go to Vietnam. What a wonderful place to have visited. I had 3 years there, and Thailand as well. I got these wonderful pictures of all the things, the people I met and got along with.
Well, I'm so glad you managed to chronicle some of that, and that's going to be of huge value to your family, and who knows others besides in the future.
And even myself, I thought, I'll read it. You know, when you can read it properly, because it's all been edited.
I know, and I'm trying to persuade my parents to spend some time just starting this by going through the box of photographs in the cupboard under the stairs, you know, and pull them out and then start to chronicle them and perhaps digitise some of them and write up what some of them are.
Do you think my father was in the First World War, which that makes me sound terribly ill, but I come from a 3rd marriage. But yeah, you just think of he ended up in the Second World War, being a major in the army. He loved the army, and just think if he could have written about the times he was in the trenches or whatever, you know. He was born in 1885, that's right, 95, sorry. And he was in the First World War. He looked round and he was quite keen, so one of those at the time. So yes, like you say.
Chris, great story. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing it with us, and I wish you well. Thank you very much indeed. Heidi in Swansea on the email. Good morning to you. Sort of funny, Jim. Sort of sad. Bad as well. I had my first ever job in Thornton's chocolate shop in Uxbridge over Easter when I was 19. lasted about 3 weeks. Then I found out I was pregnant with my first child with my partner 2 weeks into the job, and I sadly have never worked since. But the good part, of course, though, is that I wouldn't have my 5 beautiful children now. And now I have the best job ever, which is full-time mother and home educator to all my children, and homekeeper as well. So the silver lining, always the best. Absolutely. Heidi, thank you for that. This one is from Pat, says Jim. I hope you're well. Building, cladding, I am, thank you. Building, cladding, and who is responsible? Now, all new buildings are built to meet building authority that defines the standards. Unfortunately, this problem is worldwide, of course, and in all cases the standards are under the control of government authorities. As a consequence, these government authorities had the power to pass the buck. This problem should have been sorted as soon as problems were recognised, but this was not done, and many more buildings were built and then sold and occupied. All of this catastrophe is yet another abuse of power and finance, i.e. greed, in our modern society. Thank you, Pat. It was a pleasure. And this one is from James. Says, Jim, I'm 25. I did have depression from about 14 when my dad passed away until about 20. I found just going for a run made a huge difference to me. I just wanted to say that people who are feeling low, when you don't want to get out of bed, going out for just half an hour for a walk or a run can make much more of a difference than you think. James, thank you. You're absolutely right. Just walking the dog for me is my respite from a usually otherwise frenetic day. Let's get to another call. Richard's on the line next in Leicester. Hello, Richard. Good morning to you.
Hi. I wanted to talk about a coronavirus-related topic.
Sure.
I don't make a habit of ringing radio stations, but I don't think it's right for me to say this winds me up. This distresses me.
Okay, what's on your mind?
It is the lack of adherence to even the most basic precautions by a huge part of the population, at least where I live. I'm talking about people that wear a face mask but just over their mouth or under their chin, or just over their mouth and not their nose, which I saw the other day. And I just think, why? What did you lose the instructions? What is so hard to work out that a face mask goes over your face? How can you be that stupid, that ignorant, that selfish? You see people in shops not wearing one at all, and nobody says anything. The guy on the door isn't wearing one. The guy serving you isn't wearing one. The person stacking the shelves has got one under their chin. It's not a chin strap. 50,000 people have died. 9 months in, 10 months in, whatever it is, I've lost count. People are just not doing the most obvious, basic things. They're still standing around in crowds of 40 or 50 outside takeaways right next to each other. And it makes me want to cry sometimes, to be honest. I get home and I am so stressed. I've got to the point of saying something to people.
Yeah.
That I went in a shop the other day and there's a fella on the door and he just had the mask over his mouth and he'd got about 10 straps holding it round his mouth, performing no useful function whatever. And I said to him, mate, it goes over your nose. And he didn't even acknowledge me. He just stared at me as if I'd asked him to dress as a banana. And it just, I absolutely despair. If these people are a vast proportion of the population, we're all going to die. It absolutely makes me despair.
The lack of compliance that we see, Richard, and I've witnessed it too, perhaps not quite to the degree you've described, but I have also seen members of the public failing to comply with the rules. Some may be exempt, and we allow for that, of course, but those, as you say, who wear the face mask as a chin strap as opposed to over the nose and mouth just leave me dumbstruck as well, particularly when you're actually within the environment where you're supposed to be wearing them. So on a bus, for example, or in the supermarket, to see somebody browsing the shelves with their face mask tucked under their chin is just wrong. And I understand the frustration. I understand that people are weary of these restrictions and rules that we have to comply to all the time, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. The rules, there's a favourite cliche, isn't there? Rules are meant to be broken, but perhaps not in this case.
No, a couple of things that really stuck in my mind recently. I went into a shop, I shan't name it, and they had a guy on the door, and his function that day was to stand in the doorway, pointing at the open door, saying, "Go out of this door." But you had to walk within about a foot of him to get through the door. And he wasn't wearing a mask. And you see people on buses, they don't wear a mask, the driver doesn't say anything to them, or they take the mask off as soon as they get on the bus, nobody says anything. There's still people snorting and clearing their nose and spitting in the street. There's still people sitting 5 or 6 to a bench for no apparent reason in the middle of a plague. The shops aren't even open, and people are sitting in the streets in Leicester city centre, crammed onto a bench together as if they're at seaside. It's nearly December, it's December, near enough. And why? Why would you sit out?
Well, because they may live in a very tiny flat. I drove through Shepherd's Bush on my way into work tonight. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of London, but there's a triangular green in the middle of what is a very busy area of roads and also shopping and residential accommodation, all packed into quite a tiny area. And Shepherd's Bush Green tonight was packed with people sitting around drinking out of tins of lager, socialising, standing around chatting. And my initial reaction, like yours, Richard, is what are they doing? But of course then you look up and you see 3 giant tower blocks of flats, people who have no outside space of their own, have no fresh air to speak of in their accommodation, and sometimes you just need to get outside, don't you, and get a bit of a break from the confines of your 4 walls. So you have to fold a bit of empathy into the understanding of why people are behaving that way. But I appreciate when you cross the line and start breaking the rules, then that's where your tolerance begins to weaken. Yeah,
I mean, I'm not a particular stickler for rules, but the common sense rule is stay apart 2 meters, and we
all know the rules, don't we?
Five people from different households, whether they be flats or whatever, all sitting on the same bench, are going to be able to give it to each other, and they'll go back and give it to everybody in their house. And the fact that people can't see this.
Well, I know, but I came to the conclusion some time ago, Richard, in terms of my own life, not so much the programme, because I'll happily talk about it on a broader sense on air, but in my own life and in my own sphere of influence, it's about, you have to be quite stoical about this and recognise that you can only do what you can do. You're not responsible for the security guard, you're not responsible for the people sitting on the bench, so you must do what you can do, and then you're going to have to leave them to deal with their own lookout, really. Otherwise, the futility of that the frustration of that situation will overwhelm you, and at the end of the day, it's not your responsibility. But I appreciate you sharing your frustration with me this morning. I think others will share it too. I must go because I need to get to Glyn before the news. Thank you for your call. Glyn's in Derbyshire, though. Hello, Glyn. Good morning to you.
Hi, how you doing, mate?
Very well. Nice to hear from you this morning. Glyn, what would you like to say?
I thought I'd talk in London. Being I was born there.
Okay, all right.
I was born in Stepney, but I live in Derbyshire since I was 2.
Oh, all right, okay. So you feel...
I'm going on 60 now.
All right. Well, what's on your mind tonight then, Glyn?
Well, like, people think, talk about rich man, poor man. Getting back to that, I'm sick of that concrete stuff. I mean, I'm fed up with people ignoring rules myself. I agree with that last call. But anyway, getting back to my life, I thought I was black sheep of the family.
Right.
And my dad says, come on, time for a bath, and do a tin bath in front of the fire. I used to get in it and I felt terrible. I felt absolutely awful. I felt worse when I got out of it than when I got in it. And then my dad would say, what's your problem? And he'd slap me out face, and I used to end up with welt marks on my face.
Crikey.
He didn't mess with that. My dad was a tough man. And he went, right, go on, you're going to visit your grandmother now, weekend.
Mm.
So I did, and